Hi everyone, welcome to What Is This Weapon? I'm Jonathan and this is the FN SCAR SC. SC for subcompact. However, I'm not just here to talk about this particular variant. You may have seen or heard in at least the firearms news, if not anywhere else, that the SCAR has been discontinued, which immediately people responded to and said, no, it isn't. And that's correct. So what's actually happened is that, as with many modern, shall we say, military-derived firearms, they have a civilian semi-automatic equivalent that people can own in other countries, notably in the US, and lots of other places too, but notably the US, certainly applies in this case, and FN USA have discontinued all but one of that range of civilian semi-automatic versions of their SCAR rifle family, with the exception of the 15P pistol, legally a pistol in the United States. It's basically, appropriately enough, this thing in semi-automatic without a stock and without a foregrip. This one's also without a foregrip, but that is what dictates whether it's a pistol or not. So that one is remaining in the FN USA civilian market lineup. The rest of the SCAR range is still available for military, security service, police customers, whoever. So it's not dead, it's still around. And we have 3 different variants plus a bonus item in the collection. And I also recently got to fire this, not this one, at an FN event. So we can show you a little bit of a clip of some shooting of the thing as well, and out to a bit of distance too. So our range, which people love to call an office, is only 15 meters. So anything further than that is interesting for the likes of me, flying a desk, as it were. So to briefly sort of recap, because there's plenty of material out there on how the SCAR came to be, but I think we should cover some of it. Let's put this to one side. We'll come back to this because it's important in the development of the family overall. Let's start with, this is the SCAR L, or SCAR 16 as it also became known. We don't have any accessories fitted to these really, just a little hand stop on the SC there. They have always come as standard with a gas block mounted folding front sight. The SC doesn't do that because it can't sort of accommodate that in that very small form factor. That has a full set of folding sights, but the rest of the family have always had the standard factory folding iron sights and then a great big amount of space on the monolithic upper receiver. It's one of the first designs to do that, for loads of space for an optic, a magnifier, night vision, thermal, however you want to set up the rifle. And coming from the era it comes from, effectively a sort of quad rail setup as well. So a 6 o'clock rail here usually for grips, and then 3 and 9 o'clock left and right strips of rail there as well. So not equivalent really to the Knight's armament rail on the M4, say, a typical 4 rail setup. So the SCAR L, or light, she says on the side here, SCAR L, and tells you what caliber it is, 5.56 millimeter. People sometimes get confused, certainly some gamers who aren't as interested in firearms as others get confused between this and this, which is the SCAR H, or heavy. And again, it's written on the side, so standard format for these are, I guess, first generation SCARs. The SC is something a little bit in the middle, as we'll come to. So FN Herstal, Belgium, unsurprisingly, SCAR H, and then Cal 762x51. So they're marked equivalently. These two were acquired at exactly the same time, which is interesting because the upper receivers are slightly different colors. Doesn't mean to say they were made at the same time, but we did get them at the same time. All 3 of these came into the UK as dealer samples for a Section 5 dealer who might be looking to sell them in batches to other parts of the world. So sometimes that's how we get stuff that's modern in this collection, because they're kind of surplus to requirements once they've been shown around, demonstrated, fired, whatever. And you can see how this is the same design, only a bigger round, unsurprisingly. So I guess if you're not, I mean, you can clearly see the magazine is larger front to back. It's very similar to the old FAL magazine, by the same company, of course, but goes straight in, doesn't rock in, and it has this bumper that makes it flat-based as well, which the L doesn't. So if anyone is ever confused about this, what size of the, so apart from using the internet banana for scale, how do we determine which is which? Well, the magazine should be a dead giveaway. So we'll let those hang out there. These, well, I suppose I should cover the infamous Ugg boot stock, as people call it on the internet. So this is designed to, it's a 6-position sliding stock, and the positions are actually marked on the side. So we press the button and we pull that out to whichever position we want. So all the way from 1, makes it very long, all the way down to 6. And we also have an adjustable cheek piece, which is what gives it its distinctive profile, I think. So press the button, pop that up. That means that brings your eye up to the level of an optic, roughly. That's the idea. And this other button, press and fold, and the cartridge case deflector here has a notch in it to lock that in the closed position, which makes this one pretty short, not quite as short as this, with a 6.5-inch barrel in this SC version. Now that's telescoping buttstock. We'll come back to this one in a bit more detail in a moment. But that does actually, you're sort of kind of what you want to do with it. So with the telescoping buttstock, sliding buttstock does not go as flush with the receiver as this, because it has to stick out the back, but you're getting the same sort of overall length with a short barrel. So it's kind of what you want to choose to put on this. This thing in the catalogue as it stands, I believe, by default comes with the standard folding stock anyway. So you can have the ultimate shortness, if that's what somebody would need. And off the top of my head, Special Operations Forces fighting for inside a vehicle, or perhaps concealing it under a coat or something, might want something in a rifle caliber, 5.56, or in this case, 300 blackout, developed for 5.56 and 300. So this is why there are different options. Now, ultimately, FN have decided, I guess, that you can choose what stock you want, and by default, they all come with this stock. I guess that's why this one is in the catalogue looking like that. When it was first announced, and we saw the news about this, 2017, the first versions appeared at arms shows, it appeared with this sliding stock. But very quickly, so SCAR, loosely, stands for Special Operations Forces Combat Assault Rifle, which is a little bit of a reach. But that's because that's the name of the US Special Operations Command, SOCOM program, to replace, or the intention was to replace, well, a few different rifles, I guess, but including the M4 with something that was, well, what were they looking for? So this is 2003. Afghanistan is fully underway at this point. Iraq is happening, and Special Operations Forces in the US are seeing some shortcomings, which have, I guess, since been walked back a bit with the 5.56 M4A1. They are questioning its reliability. They are questioning its durability. The Navy SEALs in particular are wanting something that can pop straight up out of the water and fire without any problems. That can be a problem with the gas tube system and small caliber barrel of the AR-15 series. There are ways around that, but they wanted it to be sort of over-the-beach capable. They're also questioning a loss of lethality from the 14.5-inch barrel of the M4 versus the 20-inch barrel of the M16. They're the ones driving the short barrel trend for obvious good reasons, but they also don't want to lose velocity and therefore terminal effect. Although we end up with some variants with short barrels, that's really where this idea of different calibers starts to come in. So they're looking at convertibility initially, and then they settle on two distinct platforms, the light and the heavy. So they'll stick with 5.56, and ultimately they improve the ammunition to make some of these concerns go away anyway. But they'll then have the 7.62 option in a variety of barrel lengths where they might need a bit more, and I'll use the expression, it's not very helpful in many ways, but stopping power, terminal effect, effectiveness, lethality. This is also the period of concerns about dirt ending up in the bolt carrier group, the receiver of the AR-15 family. There's a lot of kind of talk about how that's bad, and it's hot and it's dirty right where it feeds the ammunition, and that's a bad thing. And I think maybe some people are buying into that in SOCOM as well, I don't know. And they're certainly questioning not so much the reliability of the platform, but of short barrel variants with high rates and volumes of fire, such as they might need to use in a particular mission. So they put out a specification in October 2003, and they're looking for a SCAR family of weapons, they call it, with, quote, ergonomic commonality and the highest degree of parts commonality possible. And in fact, we've ended up, the three examples we have largely interchangeable parts. This is a long-running theme in firearms history, and we think of the Stoner 63, which is meant to be a sort of grab bag, pick and mix approach. We take that receiver, that trigger group, that barrel length, that feed device, and we build a rifle out of it. Well, we haven't ever achieved that, but every time there's a major weapons program, people go back to this idea of at least commonality of parts, and it makes sense for the manufacturer as well, because they're making the same selection of parts, supplying a range of weapons configured appropriately. And then the idea was, and one of the requirements they needed, was a relatively quick change barrel on a mission configurable basis. And that's what we see. If you've ever wondered what these black lumps are on the SCAR family, both sides, they house the screws that hold the barrel in. So it's not a super quick change barrel like the Beretta ARX 160, where you can lock the bolt back, pull down two tabs, and the barrel just pops out with the gas parts attached. That's the ultimate quick change, like some imaginary scenario where you're carrying spare barrels in your backpack or something. I don't think that's ever been done, but you can do that with something like that. That's not what was required from the SCAR program, so that's not what was delivered. You'll find most modern rifles, then you're not needing an armourer to spend a bit of time at the bench pulling the barrel and refitting it. You're doing it with screws, bolts, some form of quicker attachment system. And then you can change barrel length, and then laterally caliber as well. I say laterally, there was a requirement in there for multi-caliber capable. So even though they went for 5.56 and 7.62, 7.62 was referred to as a baseline caliber. They were already looking at one of these intermediate cartridges, maybe 6.8 SPC, 6.5 Grendel, something else that they hadn't heard of yet that they might be able to accommodate in this sort of form factor of the 7.62 gun. So that's their big hope for the future for improved calibers, because the stopping power of 5.56 kept coming back into the argument, and it was around at this time as well. And there was a requirement for an enhanced grenade launcher module as well, which we also have. So this is the FN40GL. This is another sort of modular approach. So it has this magazine housing extension / trigger group, double action trigger, cross bolt safety that blocks the trigger. Even more important with explosive munitions that you have a safety catch on there. And that mounts to, so this is replaceable. So this is actually marked FNGL-L, like the weapon. So -L, this goes on your -L weapon, as if you couldn't figure out that this fits this. And then this can swap out for a 7.62 one. It can swap out for a standalone, so that's a -S, grip stock kind of assembly, so you can use it as a standalone grenade launcher, which becomes increasingly popular, well, significantly later on than we're talking about here, 2003, 2004, but still. So this is very quick mount. Normally you'd want to take the magazine off, but we can actually, if we want to, slot it on there with the magazine on, 2 latches, and we're done. And although there are electro-optical aiming systems for such things, the standard iron sight assembly goes on the left side rail, flip this lever over, and then you have conventional front and rear iron sights with different apertures for different engagement distances. So in theory, you're shooting out to something like that sort of angle for maximum range. These 40 by 46 millimeter grenades, pretty slow moving, and they do travel in a curving trajectory. So you do have to offset like an old Lee Enfield volley sight, dial sight, I should say. And you're loading with this latch, so press with the thumb, slide forward, like an M203, but it pivots to the left or to the right, so that for ease of loading and enabling you to load the slightly longer overall length cartridges that carry different loads, which is quite important to be able to do. And that looks, I think it's probably aesthetically quite good on there with that short barrel. Whether it's a sensible combination, I'll leave you to decide. So we have a first solicitation in January 2004, and then we have trials running till September, end of September, I think, 2004. This is where it gets quite grey. So I have not been able to determine what the other submissions all were, but I do know some. The Colt submissions for the SCAR are really quite conventional ARs with monolithic upper receivers, another sort of early stab at that. We have the Robinson Arms XCR, which has been quite celebrated by some. A long stroke gas system, scratch design thing with a bit of inspiration, I guess from the AK notably, with AR ergonomics, a little bit like this, but not like this. Gets excluded from the trials on a sort of a technicality and doesn't take part. Still around today, well worth a look as a modern design. One we do know quite a bit about is the Knights Armament entry, which is their SLIC, or Special Operations Forces. They're packing a lot into the S on these acronyms. Light Individual Carbine Kalashnikov, SLIC. I guess it was that or LIC, and they went with SLIC. Which is kind of, they have a video about this on their channel, the Knights Armament, so check that out. It's reminiscent of the FN/FNC or the SIG 550 series, where you've got a sort of more modern architecture, but with quite an AK-inspired bolt and gas system in there. So that's an interesting one. We have IMI with something. I don't know if it was some early large caliber Tavor and then a normal Tavor, I don't know, genuinely don't know. It could have been Galil family, not sure. Beretta also at least enter something early on, don't know what. And HK, now this is even weirder because there's an article claiming that the XM8 was excluded because it was already being trialled for general US Army adoption and therefore was government sponsored and therefore couldn't be entered, so that didn't get entered. And the 416 was under some sort of legal challenge at the time, so that couldn't get entered either. And I'm not sure what else HK would have entered, so I don't know that there was an HK competitor. So normally, after 20 odd years have passed, we can say, ah, yes, it was these manufacturers and it was these specific rifles, and here they are in a collection somewhere. We can't do that for the SCAR program. Relatively few of them are known. So FN win that contest effectively, January 2005. I won't go into the details of the trial regime, but there is a good article that we'll link that breaks down how kind of hardcore that was. Like anything that can come out on top on that is going to be pretty good, I think it's safe to say. So what emerges is what you've already seen, the SCAR H with a 13, a 16 and a 20-inch barrel, and the SCAR L with the 10, 14-inch barrel, or the 18-inch barrel. So they don't quite correlate, but this is what they were hoping to account for different mission sets, I guess, with the different barrel lengths on the two different variants. This becomes the Mark 17 Mod 0. This is US Navy terminology, because I guess that's what SOCOM defaulted to. And we have the Mark 16 Mod 0, hence they're sometimes called SCAR 16, SCAR 17. Technically it should be SCAR L, SCAR H, or Mark 16 or Mark 17, and then the Mark 13 is the designation for the grenade launcher, so Mark 13 Mod 0. If these things get an incremental improvement, it would go to Mod 1, Mod 2, etc. Now, this is where this is kind of a success and it's kind of the big caveat. So SOCOM adopt both of these, they go into full production. They then kind of back away from the 5.56 version. The talk at the time is that they're going to just go for a caliber conversion for the SCAR H and stick with that. There's some discussion that this is too expensive to justify over the M4A1 for SOCOM at large. Lots of different units in SOCOM, sort of tier 1, but also tier 2, other units. And there's also the argument that the juice isn't sort of worth the squeeze of, well, we said it wasn't reliable and robust enough, but actually it kind of is. This is the M4A1. And so they walk it back, and this gets sort of dropped from the armory, as it were. Or at least they don't procure as many as they were going to, and then you just sort of stop seeing them. These both do appear in footage and photos from the global war against terror, as it's often known. But this sort of fades away more quickly. This stays in service. It's offering something more. It's a modern, to use the phrase, battle rifle in 7.62. It's much lighter than earlier thing. It beats an M14 for sure. Beats the old FAL in various ways as well. Sorry, veterans who love that. It's a modernized platform in a bigger caliber, and what they're finding in combat in Afghanistan in particular is extended ranges, and they're really valuing that extra punch, extra reach from the bigger cartridge. Now, the bit of this story that was quite opaque to me, so I'm going to explain it to what I've sort of learned cataloguing and documenting these for the collection to you, is the Mark II SCAR. So these are the Mark I. They're not called that because this is FN's own terminology for it. Not the same thing as Mark 16. That's the US Navy's designation, SOCOM's designation. We're talking about internal or FN catalog designation. So this is always just the SCAR L, the SCAR H. But we do, in 2021, mid-2021, the FN website, promotional material, stuff that's appearing at arms shows and everything, suddenly starts being referred to as the SCAR Mark II. And I thought, I wonder what that actually designates, because I'm not sure myself. And soon find out that most of those changes are embodied in the SCAR SC. So this first appears in sort of early form in 2017. Articles are floating around in 2018, 2019, and then it's its own thing from there. Available for these the sort of niche applications where previously you might have used a pistol caliber weapon, a submachine gun. You're using 5.56 or especially, in theory, 300 blackout, giving you a lot of close range terminal effect out of a very short package. And there is that. So that will show you that buttstock, 2 positions there. That's fully collapsed. If you just pull it all the way out sharply, it will go past the first stop to the second stop. So if you slowly pull it out, it stops there. If you rip it out, it goes all the way. Very small, thick butt pad there. And that made much more sense when I got my hands on this thing and actually shot it out to 100 meters. And the FN guys were explaining to me that you're not really supposed to shoulder it in a conventional way. You're supposed to bring it in more centrally, closer to the center line, and sort of look over the top. And ideally you have optics that will bring up your eye line as well. And that worked really well. So we'll show you that shortly. And my colleague Alex also fired one of these out to the same distance, but he's firing deliberately, semi-automatic, trying to hit that target, and it was doing a good job at that as well. And in this one, it's a 7.5-inch barrel, 9 inches for 300 blackout, interestingly, because people like SIG have shorter barrels for 300 as well. FN went for 9 inches for 300 blackout, but it's this 7.5-inch barrel for 5.56. Being multi-caliber, as it says on the receiver, Those are the two options. And I realized that, as I say, that there are Mark II changes to this one, although we don't have a Mark II scar as yet. So the biggest, the most obvious is this reinforcement to the front of the magazine well here. Now, from testing this out with a Magpul PMag, I saw someone suggested online that this was an adaptation for modern plastic magazines, polymer magazines, and I do believe they're correct. There'd be no reason why the front of that magazine well would fail, but if you have to remove a little bit of material to make a plastic magazine go in and out more smoothly, then you might well have to reinforce the front of the magazine well. So I believe that's what that is. Otherwise, you're not going to see much externally. The biggest change is internal. Now this does not have the, if we lock this open, the non-reciprocating cocking handle. So one feature that people weren't entirely happy with, or some people, was the cocking handle that flies back and forth, and you could accidentally foul that with, I don't know, some cover you're firing from behind, some netting or something, your own thumb, something like that could impede the operation of the weapon and stop it from chambering the next round, otherwise cause problems. Not the problem like it is for a bullpup where it's right next to your face, but nonetheless. So FN came up with a design for a non-reciprocating cocking handle that stays forwards, much like the AR-15 one does. This isn't that. However, if we quickly pop off the lower receiver there, so it's very lightweight, just a trigger mechanism in there, obviously. We've got our controls on both sides, or at least we've got the mag catch on both sides. We don't have a bolt release on both sides. This design kind of predates that requirement. Oh, I nearly forgot. One of the A2 changes is no bump on the pistol grip. So this is an AR-15 M16A2 pattern pistol grip. And on the original designs, always came with the finger bump that's on that Colt design grip. Well, for the SC, and all these changes carry over to the A2, all the other scars, they got rid of that bump. So that's another way you can spot an A2 from the outside. We then have, so we slide off the buttstock. This is completely interchangeable with these. That gives us access to the inside, and we'll see that what comes out there is a shorter, more complex bolt carrier than is in the SCAR Mark I. And what's left behind is, and the cocking handle comes out. Oh, this is another universal A2 change, the downward curved cocking handle, whether it's reciprocating or non-reciprocating. On the A2s, it comes in the downward angled position. You can install it the other way up if you want to, but the point is to limit snagging on stuff. And then we'll see we have this sled, as they call it. So they've effectively separated the bolt carrier into two components. So what that arrangement allows you to do is clip this sled to the bolt carrier for reciprocating operation, so when you're manually cycling the weapon, but in all other circumstances to disconnect it so that the cocking handle is free. Well, isn't free, it stays forward. The bolt carrier is free to reciprocate. Easier to show you that in the gun, so let's do that. Or rather in the upper receiver. So reinsert that. Oops, we need the bolt fully forward, otherwise it won't go in. There we go. And then we will put the cocking handle in on the right-hand side, which is an option anyway, but it's easier to show you as well. So as it's gone in, you'll see the charging handle is already non-reciprocating. I know it's reciprocating, but when it's clipped forward, it isn't reciprocating. That's why they call it the non-reciprocating charging handle. It's not going to hit your knuckles, your fingers, it's not going to stop the weapon from cycling because it's staying put under the normal operation of the gun. So there's that bolt carrier group operating normally as if you're firing. But whenever you need to manually cycle the weapon to clear a stoppage, or whatever, for any other reason, as soon as you pull back on that cocking handle, the two connect with each other, and they move as on a SCAR Mark 1 together. So that will only ever happen when you are manually operating the weapon. So if you manually lock it open, the cocking handle will be to the rear. Or if you pull it back on an empty magazine, for example, or if you manually hold it open with your thumb on the catch. In all other circumstances, with the return spring in there, there is enough oomph, as it were, to clip this in place, separate the two, and our bolt carrier merrily does its thing. It's probably as much as I need to show you. So if you look at any SCARs, early SCARs, they will have something that looks more like that, and it's just solid machined metal, steel. Now, there is a change to the gas block, but we can't really see it on the SC because we have this truncated upper receiver here, obviously without the 3 vent holes that are on the full-length models. So I guess there are 3 main upper receiver lengths. There are the original lengths with different barrels coming out of the end. Then there's the SC, which is sort of customized at this very short overall length. And then there's what became the PR, the 20-inch SCAR H, as it's known in Mark II guys, which has a long enveloping upper receiver with a hole to access the gas regulator. So 2 different patterns of gas block, Mark I, Mark II. At the time of recording, I'm not sure what the difference is. I can see the difference, but I don't know why. It pins on at the front instead of pinning on halfway down. It's a slightly different shape. It looks like a less complex shape, so I would guess it was a manufacturing improvement that was made, maybe discovered while they were working on this one, because again, the SC introduces it first. Now on the SC, this is so tight up here, they have to shave a little bit off the gas block to fit it in. We have all of these, well, certainly all the ones I'm talking about have just the 2 settings, well, 3 settings. 3rd setting is for disassembly though. So with this little vane uppermost, 12 o'clock, that's normal setting. And then if you fit a suppressor to these, in order to mitigate the additional, this sort of extra back pressure, you flip it over to that position and it then vents off some of the gas. So if we put the gas plug into the 3rd position, rotate it all the way and pull it out. Now, if you can't see this, trust me when I tell you, the 2 port sizes, which would normally be 2 different sizes with different flow rates of gas for different burn rates, etc., different barrel lengths typically, are the same size, which confused me briefly until I realized that what that's doing is putting a gas escape hole into position with a hole on the block to vent off some of that additional back pressure. So rather than 2 different size holes for sort of normal and adverse, this is only worried about being suppressed or not, and therefore it's just at a setting where it's venting off excess gas. In case you're wondering, this is a short stroke gas system, so this is similar in principle to the old FNFAL, but it uses a rotary unlocking bolt, similar to the AR-10 or AR-15 platforms, but it is still using a short stroke gas piston, designed for the purpose rather than being sort of added on as with the HK 416 and 417. And the piston is, we'll show you a picture of this, but it's shaped very much like a car engine piston, more so than most firearm operating system pistons are. But it is in there quite tight with some gas rings on there, so we won't pop it out just at the moment. There was a new sight setup designed for the SC, which is a push button on the top to fold. And that also was carried over to the Mark IIs from FN Herstal as well. So the old pattern of folding rear sight that you see here, which is just fold up, fold down, that must have been getting accidentally folded down, I guess. So they put a push button on there for the SC, and they've retrospectively put that on the whole Mark II range as well. Most of which won't, or all but this, don't need the pop-up front sight, but nonetheless, this one, of course, has it. We also have a different selector lever on this, which looks a bit like a giant AR selector, but that goes away and doesn't appear on the Mark II range and even disappears from this as well. The only other Mark II change, and the only one we can't show you, is the sling loops at the back. So they go from these oblong shapes to round reinforced sling loops at the back. All the Mark IIs I've seen have that feature as well. So essentially, they're prototyping the Mark II range with the SC variant. I think some people are probably, certainly in the US, are looking at discontinuing the civilian versions, most of them, all but one, as some indication that this is winding down. Well, we know FN have some rifle projects in the works. To date, over 25 countries have adopted the SCAR in one form or another. In common with a lot of other modern designs, the domination of the AK, the AR platforms is such that it's hard to replicate that success. And so everything up to and including the SIG MCX and its big brother MCX Spear / M7 rifle, the general pattern is a couple of major military adopters, often the sort of country of origin. So in this case, the Belgian Armed Forces replaced their FNC rifles with these. And then maybe one or two other nations will go for like some major adoption. And then the rest of the sort of custom is small quantities for special operations forces, security units, police, that kind of thing. And we even have weapons like the AR-18, Stoner 63, which have been very influential and perhaps have had limited, certainly the Stoner 63 had limited service. AR-18 has had no significant adoption at all, but is hugely influential on later designs. This isn't that. This is in the vein of, well, you name it really, Tavor, MCX, the Bren series of rifles, not the Bren LMG, obviously, the MSBS Grot. Well, then you've got SA-80, things like SA-80 where there are hopes for that level of adoption, like one major armed force and then maybe a few others and then lots of smaller purchases, and it doesn't happen. So this is well up there, I think, in terms of contemporary service rifles that are at the very least midlife, let's say. It's been around for 20 years. The trials were 2004. It's 2025, nearly 2026. The normal life cycle of a rifle that isn't the AR-15 or the AK is perhaps that, 20, 30 years, something like that, before it has to significantly change because the customer is always wanting something new and different. So we're interested to see where that goes. We hope that our friends at FN will bring us any of their new projects to show you. But I wanted to catch up with where we are with the FN SCAR family. So it's still out there, still in production, still being purchased, no doubt, and still a big gun in popular culture as well. It's made it into the new Battlefield 6. So you can jump in and play with that. That's the Mark II version, by the way. I think every detail of that. And it is quite a detailed game. You can check out my thoughts on that over at the EXP Expert Reacts channel. I think they've done a good job with that and with basically all the guns in that game. So I don't think the FN SCAR is going anywhere anytime soon. Thanks for watching, everybody. We appreciate it as always. With Christmas not too far around the corner, you might like to check out our shop. It really does have some great stuff in it. Link in the description, or you can just check out our website. Related, check out our curatorial bundles involving members of the curatorial team mooching around our shop, choosing their ideal Christmas presents. Not sure if it's for themselves or for other people, but definitely give that a look and have a think about what you might want to pick up from our shop. But whatever you do, please be sure to join us again next week for another episode of What Is This Weapon?